The game tonight takes place in 1381 in France. The Dark Ages. Yet slowly, as it always must, a new dawn threatens on the horizon. The shadows that haunt and hunt the pitch darkness of these years scurry about, having grown fat like overfed leeches in their manors and castles. The world has been absorbed in darkness for several hundred years, and the fiends that stalk in the lightless abyss have rejoiced. But torches are being lit. Across the rural landscape of Western Europe, those who have suffered the most at the grasping hands of the lords and ladies stir restlessly. The peasants are no longer content. Yet the leeches barely notice. In darkened manors and cold forbidding castle, teeth pierce flesh, fiends gorge upon the bodies and the blood of the weak and innocent and unfortunate. The light of God is but a mockery of salvation, the words of the Bible turned on their stomach and mounted from behind by the instruments of sin. The night echoes with screams of devilish torments and fiendish pleasures, the two mingling until unrecognizable one from the other. So it is at the manor of the Toreador elder Aveline Cristu. Long ago the manor was an abbey, l'abbaye Crevecoeur, but the Black Plague decimated the monks who died in heaps inside its walls. Now it is the home of Aveline and those who serve her. Aveline was once one of the enlightened, taking great pleasure and joy in art and beauty. But alas, darkness encroaches, madness seeps in and takes hold. Madness. Aveline has, over the past few years, grown increasingly bestial ever since her return from Hungary. She now nightly commits the most depraved and senseless tortures on those unfortunate enough to fall into the hands of her servants. Even her newest child, the once talented musician Geoffroy, now fills the dark halls of the manor with his screams of pain and ecstasy nightly. And Aveline grows more monstrous and deranged every night. What of the others, then, who also spend their nights at the manoir Crevecoeur? Those who, in one way or another, have found themselves under the sway of Aveline, have drunk of her blood several times, and now fear her, but cannot but love her too. Now we see a grizzled old servant step out into the courtyard just as dusk falls. With slow, methodical movements, he uses a freshly sharpened axe to chop down the old sick tree that has long stood at the center of the courtyard. With every blow, maggots and insects spill out of it, the rotten wood splitting apart wetly with almost no effort. The blows of the axe reverberate throughout the courtyard and all the way down into the crypt, where once all the monks were buried in one massive rotting heap. And in that darkness, something stirs. What does stir in that darkness? Creep.
It's cold in the crypt. It's cold and dark and smells of old earth, decay, silent and still as death, aside from a single slow and sluggish splat, splat, splat of water somewhere in the distance. That sound. God, that sound. He knows it well. He can close his eyes and see that glorious spray of red. As though only a day has passed, he can feel the warm, thick wet across his face, and he lifts a hand to cradle his cheek, caressing a ghost as the taste of iron swells on his tongue. Agravain is a monster. He doesn't remember a time when he wasn't a monster. And now, for nearly 2 centuries, he has had the pleasure of wearing the skin of one, a Nosferatu, a hideous mangled creature, an abomination, a sin. Yes, sin. This too he knows well, though he knows of no god he can repent to. Not anymore. Rising from the depths of his stone sarcophagus, old bones can feel the approach of twilight, and he yearns to bid his own farewell to the sun, while the others still sleep in these quiet hours of early dusk. Outside, shadows stretch and yawn across the courtyard, and a single sliver of sunlight cuts like a knife through its center. He stands, admiring it. A towering figure cloaked in black robes, blasphemer, vase of prehistory, crooked and bent in stature with pale eyes, peering eagerly from behind hood and dark wrappings. If only it were a bit larger, and he could crawl into the belly of sunlight and lay there in its womb to be reborn once more in flame. Gentleman Death, come to put out the candle on this cursed existence. It would be a fine Christian death. Alas, he doesn't have the stomach for it. Plagued still by some human notion of vanity and self-preservation. Weak, but it still lingers there, picking at the back of his thoughts, denying him true release. However, he could indulge just a little bit. These fantasies deserve life from time to time. Fantasies, of which he has many. That's none of your business, now is it? A spindly hand of misshapen fingers with swollen knots for knuckles slowly raises, allowing the sunlight to lick like flames across discolored flesh, which sizzles and pops in its wake. In this theater of pain, time is suspended. There's no life or death, no God or vast nothing, only sensation, pure, raw pain. It reminds him that even when life ceases to retain any meaning, he can still feel something.
And what does Agravain do as the sun is still somewhat on the horizon, peeking in through over the horizon and coming into the manor for perhaps a few moments still? What does Agravain do?
He's waiting. He's watching.
You watch the old man in the center of the courtyard finish with his task. That tree should have been cut down a long time ago, but no one was seeing to it as he leaves behind his handiwork of this rotten tree having been felled to the ground. You spy out of the corner of your eye another man, this one quite younger, very, very beautiful, very young, very sweet looking. He's hiding around the corner of the crypt and seems to be casting about looking for someone or something. He wears the simple garb of a peasant from the village. He's looking around.
Here.
Sir Knight, sort of comes over, shuffling over. He's holding his cap in his hand, and he comes in front of you and, is it safe? Can we be seen here?
Speak. And he's going to offer his hand out, the same hand that was just sizzling in the sun, now blistered. But first, your tribute.
And you can see in his eyes for a moment the revulsion at the look of your hand, this claw, really, with all that burnt flesh and the cracked flesh and that pus are leaking out of it. But at the same time, you know that your blood, which is coursing through his body now, that you've been feeding him for some while, makes it impossible for him to resist. And with this mixture of revulsion, but also this incredible desire to please, he reaches and very gently takes your hand in his beautiful white pale hands, and brings your hand to his lips and places the lips around one of your knuckles, and just very briefly almost sucks on it, and after a moment returns your hand, and you can see that he is both disgusted with himself, but also at the same time just on the verge of almost ecstasy, as he is so happy to have been able to pay you tribute this way. You're much too kind, my lord.
Now speak.
I bring news from the village. There's a man who came in from out of town. He's led some other villages into revolts. They say all across the canton de Loic. He's gathered the other men and the other folk who are the ones who speak the loudest and the ones who say the most. They're gathering 2 nights from now at the old mill. They say that he led the revolt up in Niemance and in Loic-sur-Mer also. He's going to convince them. The atmosphere in the villages is very tense, and people are, well, my lord, they're afraid.
Does this man have a name?
I've not been able to get it yet. People just refer to him as L'Homme. I think it's perhaps in reference to the old revolt leader that came through here some years ago, Jacques Bonhomme. But I'll do my best. I will find out as much information as I can, and I'll return tomorrow at the same time, my lord, to bring you this information, if it pleases you.
This pleases me. You have done well, pet.
And you see he's hesitating, but he's looking at your hand, and you know what he wants. You know he wants a taste of your blood.
Agravain's going to offer his wrist over and take a nail from his finger, digging it into the flesh until the blood begins to pool there.
Thank you, Lord. And he grabs it almost as if he's holding a cup of wine, like that is the blood of Christ, and he brings it to his lips, and he starts to drink, and right away you can see the ecstasy that's sort of taken over him, and you know that he is greedy, and if you don't stop him, he's going to just keep drinking. But for now, he's just sucking at your wrist and just taking in everything that he can. How long do you let him go?
I give him a short moment, and then I tear my hand away.
And for a moment, you see him like madness kind of overtakes him, and he goes to reach for your hand, and then he realizes what he's doing. I'm sorry, Lord. I'm sorry. I got carried away. I didn't mean to cause offense.
Leave.
Yes. I'll return tomorrow, my lord. Good night to you. Good night to you. And he gets up and he scurries as fast as he can on out of here.
Has the sun set yet?
Yeah, just as he disappears outside the courtyard, the final rays of the sun disappear behind the walls of the manor, surrounding the manor, and you are now in comfortable darkness.
Agravain's gonna take one last look around the courtyard. There's a look of mourning on his face, as though there was some missed opportunity for him before he turns and paces back towards the manor.
As you approach the side door, you usually use the servants' entrance to get into the manor. You approach the door and immediately feel the presence of someone beyond it. You know there's someone waiting for you on the other side. Do you
I
go
move
through?
in.
You open the door. Thanks so much, Vancouver by Night. Thanks for dropping in. Cynthia's just cheered a few more bits, which gives everyone in the group an advantage. So mark those down. Yes, we are vampires. Speaking of vampires, let's cast our minds back a few minutes earlier. Just before all of this transpired with Agravain, across the courtyard from the crypt, there is an old chapel. This chapel was once just a side chapel for the early worships when this was an abbey. It has since fallen in terrible disrepair. The stonework is cracked. There are vines that are crawling all over it. Some of the stained glass windows are damaged. But as we move into this crypt, we see two servants, two young women, two handmaidens who are hurrying in from a side door into the main hall. The vaulted ceilings in this crypt, this little chapel, are not very high. It's very small, very modest chapel, somewhat in a cruciform. There is still an old dais at the front, a few broken pews here and there. There are still a little bit of paintings on the wall, some art, but all of it's old and faded and cracked. And well, if someone were to pay close attention, they would certainly smell the sort of that smell of loam and earth of the place that has slowly been creeping back, being taken back to nature, but from a slab of marble that is placed behind the altar on the dais. A little cover for this little marble box sort of slides open as the two handmaidens approach, and one of them says, "My lady, are you awake? It is sundown." "And who stirs in this little box?"
A slight woman does. She is small in stature and almost frail looking, appearing to be somewhere in her early 20s. She retains most of her youthfulness and maybe even considered doll-like in her appearance. Long, curly, red hair makes her an easy spot in a crowd. And she looks up to these two women with almost a glassy, doe-eyed expression. While lily white and almost without blemish and marring, there are deep scars on her back from obvious self-flagellation and stigmata permanently on her hands and feet. What you see is something painfully delicate, almost breakable. She is never without or far from her rosary, and even as she rises, she clutches it close to her heart. While normally modestly dressed, and in line with all rules and laws of the Catholic Church, Odette rises naked between the two women.
Praise be the Lord. My lady rises again, and they both sort of sign themselves, and one of them will come and will pick up very carefully the instrument that you used last night to administer flagellations on yourself, and will gather it up and will bring it to be cleaned for your use later, putting it on a nice little a blanket that she has on the dais. And as that's doing, the other one will come in and help you rise out of your coffin. One of them soon after is coming in with some warm, extremely hot pails of extremely hot water, and they fill this little copper tub that is in the little sacristy behind where the altar is. And in a few moments, you are able to once again slip into this hot bath that is part of your habit of inflicting pain on yourself. This water is so hot that it burns as you sort of slip into it, and your two handmaidens begin combing out your hair and washing you. And one of them picks up one of your hands and observes your stigmata, which never seem to heal. You have to force yourself to heal them every night. But she touches it very gently and says, "Do these not hurt? To have them every night like this?"
Odette will sort of smile in a strange, unnatural way, and say, "But pain is for suffering, and suffering is for Christ."
Pardon me, my lady, but I've seen you heal much more grievous wounds. I assume you could, if you wanted, simply wish them away. I admit it must be weakness on my part, but I sometimes wish that I had that ability to simply wish pain away and that it would leave. But would that make me a bad Christian if I could do that and did that?
Odette looks on her for a moment and says, "I hate to be cruel. I truly do. But you are needing of repentance for thinking that you could just wish pain away."
Yes, please forgive me.
It is not up to me to forgive you.
Shall I pray then? How may I make amends?
You may do 7 Hail Marys.
She kneels down next to you. The other one is working on your hair, and she's kind of stopped a little bit as she watches what's going on. And the other one is still holding your hand, and she repeats the first Hail Mary, and at the end of which she brings her mouth to your stigmata, and you feel her tongue gently run against it. And then she repeats a second Hail Mary, and her tongue reaches out again, lapping the blood that is coming from your hand. The other one next to you on the other side gasps and signs herself and looks away from this as the other one is feeding off of you very slowly.
Odette will look at the one who seems repulsed, and she will say, "Isaiah 58:10. And if you give yourself to the hungry and satisfy the desire that is afflicted, and then your light will rise in darkness, and your gloom shall become like midday."
And as you say that last word, midday, you hear the sound of the door of the chapel opening, and the moonlight floods in over where you are. And without looking over your shoulder to see who's there, you immediately recognize the tableau that you must pose from the back, with this one handmaiden on one side of you committing this strange dark sin that is also part of your life, this drinking of the blood. And on the other side, the one who looks away and kneels and signs herself, hoping to not find herself falling into the darkness, almost like two angels, one on each side of you, one good and one bad. And A shadow falls on you then from the moon, and you hear a voice that calls out your name. But before we find out who that voice belongs to, atop the tower, the main tower of the manor, in the garret, a little circular room that has also stained glass windows around it that have been boarded up against the sun. In a room that is filled with the tools of an artist, paintings, books, musical instruments, all sorts of items used to create art. Somebody else stirs on a bed of silk sheets. Who is this person?
Florence sits up from her bed, looking over at the painting that she had left the morning before. She is what most would consider a beautiful, with delicate features, an upturned nose, and full lips. Her hair, a deep shade of brown, almost black, that falls past her shoulders in thick waves. Her skin was pale, even before she was embraced, but with undeath it's taken on a ghostly pallor that she tries to mask with brown leaves of angelica and safflower, a homemade rouge she taps onto her cheeks after every slumber. Her eyes are dark and inviting, but intense as they stare at the unfinished painting before her, a knit in her brow as she gnaws at her bottom lip. Looking back at her is the rough shape and outline of a being perhaps too exquisite to be captured and preserved by mere brush and paint. All around her are dozens of canvases in various phases of the painting process, pages and pages of sketches scattered on the floor, but none of them complete. And as she gets up from her bed, dabbing her paintbrush into some leftover paint, she knows, even as she continues to fruitlessly smear paint across the surface, that this one will join the rest. And there's a lump in her throat, dreading what Aveline will say, dreading the disappointment. The anger, she could endure. The disappointment, though, was suffocating. She sighs heavily and tries to swallow down the lump, her normally rod-straight posture slumping as she sets her brush down, not caring about the charcoal and pigment that stains her dress when she fiddles with the skirts nervously at first, before she balls them into her fists. And she lashes out against the canvas, sending it toppling to the ground in a heap, an aggravated cry escaping her throat.
The painting falls off the easel and scatters on the floor. You look around you and you see all these fantastic works of art, many of which you made, many which are other works of art that you've just come over the years to really appreciate. And it's almost as if the eyes of the people in these paintings are looking down at you and judging you for having lost this talent, this ability that you once had. You find yourself dreading, I guess. Well, perhaps not dreading. Perhaps dreading is the wrong word, but you find yourself perhaps wondering if the art will survive you, or if you will eventually survive the art. As you look around you, what are some of the things that are painted? What are some of the subjects that you've been working on recently?
There have been several. One would be the recent acolyte to the nearby village who cannot seem to quite capture his likeness. Just the upturn of his nose, the flush of his lips. There's just something not quite right about every single iteration I try to make of him. And then there's the sketches mostly are of a beautiful, fair-haired woman reading scripture, sitting in a chapel, trying to draw inspiration from life and undeath.
As you contemplate this, the servant's door to your garret opens up, and your handmaid comes in carrying a carafe of blood. She sets it down next to the bed and starts making the bed. She knows that you get into these kind of funks, so she pretends to sort of not pay attention. And after a few moments, as she finishes making the bed, and then serves you a goblet full of blood and brings it to you. She says, there is light in the chapel, telling you that Odette has awakened for the night, as she hands you the glass.
I will. Something I do before I drink the blood every time as I smell it. It's almost as if I am expecting to be repulsed by the smell, but when I find it tempting and just mouth-watering, there's a part of me that is disgusted by myself, and yet I drink it anyway.
As you take the first sip of the night, the blood, to a certain extent at least, alleviating a little bit of the tension that's sort of been building up in you because of this painting. Your servant says, Madame Fleur, I hate to say this again, but, well, the other servants are becoming very disturbed and very afraid. The screams last night that reverberated throughout the manor, well, tell me, Madame Fleur, you've always been such a kind and gentle lady. Should we be afraid for our lives? Some of the servants are saying that we should consider leaving, that it may no longer be safe for us here.
I'm going to reach out and sort of toy with a strand of the servant's hair, caressing her cheek a little bit. And I'm going to settle a look in her eyes. My dear, it would be so much worse if you were to leave.
I understand. Please, I didn't mean to leave myself. I simply was speaking for others who, of course, don't have the luck that I have to serve you. I'll make sure the others know. Is there anything else I can do for you?
Florence is going to sort of pat her on the head with adoration. No, dear, that's quite all right. I'm going to gather my things and head towards the chapel now.
I'll return momentarily to help you dress. And she picks up the empty goblet of blood and carafe, and she exits. And as she does, you hear a knock at the door, your main door to your room.
Would it be a familiar knock?
Oh, it would definitely be a familiar knock.
That lump that Florence had tried to swallow down begins to form again.
A few moments before that morning, in a very, very dimly lit corridor at the far end of the manor, you sit, as you have been doing for, well, much longer than you would really care to think about, outside the double doors to Aveline's chamber. The collar around your neck that is chained to the wall, as always, cuts into your skin and chafes something terrible, reminding you of how bowed and broken you are, reminding you that you are under someone else's control, Tell us, what would we see if we were to gaze upon Anton?
Be a pale man, long hair, staring off into the distance. You can tell that he's thinking about something very intently, but he makes no movement, apart from the occasional adjusting of the collar to him to satiate the pain he's feeling. Very lanky, he would almost look malnourished. Kind of on the precipice of, is he really alive still? You would see the occasional flick as he would play with the rings on his fingers. There's something going on behind those eyes, but you don't know what. And he just sits, staring forward, waiting.
Soon enough, you hear the locks on the doors click open. The door is pulled open. You never know what to expect when the door opens. This morning, it's what appears to be a young woman, but who knows, dressed as a nun. Only there's something wrong with her face. Her face is not exactly the way it should be. It's almost as if someone would have put their hand in it and twisted their hand, and in twisting their hand, all the flesh, the eyeballs, the nose, all the bone structures would have shifted until it was almost diagonal. Her mouth hangs open. You see no teeth there. One of the eyes is missing, but you see a weird lump under what would be the forehead, and you assume that's perhaps where that orbit has landed. The other one barely sees through the slit that is left, and you kind of assume that perhaps this is the left eye that is now seeing through the whole of the right eye. As this woman opens the door, she lets out a soft whimper, and there's no way for you to know if it's a whimper of pain or a whimper of pleasure, but she opens the door, sees you looking at her, and immediately hides her face and pulls back. And as the door opens further, your master, for lack of a better word, Aveline, comes out. She is a tall, very elegant, very refined looking woman, Eastern European in appearance, long dark hair, impeccably dressed in the finest dress that goes all the way there, all the way to down over the hands. There's not a single bit of flesh aside from her face that is showing. She wears a very demure veil over her hair also. As soon as you see her, there's something about her presence, that awes you. You want to make love to her. You want to worship her. You want to protect her. She is your mother. She is your lover. She is your daughter. She is your sister. She is every woman of any sort of importance that has ever been in your life. The power that is in the blood bond that holds you to her makes you forget the chain at your neck, makes you forget the collar at your neck, makes you forget that this woman is your master, and with but a thought could crush you if she so chooses. She leans down in front of you and goes, "Anton, what a good boy, sitting out here waiting for your mistress to come out." And she runs her fingers through your hair. "Tell me, Anton, have you thought about what you did last night? Do you think that I can risk removing this collar? Do you have control of yourself once more?"
Upon being touched, he's going to shudder a bit and straighten everything up, trying to look presentable and respectable. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm very happy to see this. I see you're looking a little pale and a little drawn, perhaps. Perhaps a little bit of this will help you. And she reaches under her, the wrist of her dress. And when she runs her thumb along her skin, the skin parts. It's not cut, it just sort of parts as if she wills it, and blood starts to flow, and she brings it to your mouth and she offers it to you, and she goes, "Don't take too much now. We need to save some for the others. But you've been such a good boy. I believe you deserve a little reward. And perhaps it will prevent you from losing control once more. Here. Good boy." And she brings the wrist to your mouth.
He'll grab under her hand and kind of very softly hold on to it as he looks down, and then begins to lap the blood. Very, very, very controlled, very, very neatly, trying not to make a mess on her dress.
After you've had your fill in, drinking from her blood, as always, brings on this euphoric feeling and strengthens your desire to protect and to worship this woman in front of you. She will pull her wrist away from you and touch it with her other hand and close the wound, and she'll say, "You're such a good boy, Anton. Now, tell me, can I take this chain off of you?"
Yes, ma'am. It won't happen again.
"It's better not." She reaches over and unsnaps the chain to the collar. You still wear the collar. It's still there, but in her presence, you don't feel it anymore. It's just almost a reward now. "Come, we have to see the others." She will guide you down the hall and then up a set of stone stairs. Arriving at the door at the top of a tower, she will knock and then wait very patiently for someone to invite her in.
Come in.
She pushes into the room, and you see once again not only the lady of this manor, Fleur, but your sire, the one who created you, the one who took you from your mortal life and brought you into the night. And much like Anton, you feel the power of the blood bond as it wafts over you, and it pulls at you even harder because you share the same blood that she does. And she comes in and she goes, "Ah, ma belle Fleur." And she comes over and she runs a finger along your cheek and she offers her hand for you to kiss.
I will gently, with adoration, press a gentle kiss to her hand, letting it linger.
"It's good to see you again. Now, tell me that you've made some progress. What are you working on?"
There's panic bubbling in Fleur as she sort of frantically squats down to pick up the painting that she had knocked over, pressing it back onto the easel, and taking a step back, already knowing what was to come.
She approaches the painting. Anton, you stand quietly by the door, observing all of this. She steps in front of the painting, and you don't hear or see anything. You just feel, as you were afraid, this disappointment just radiating off of her. And she says, "My dear child, your muse has indeed left you, hasn't she? Anton, would you dispose of this, please. And she says it with such disgust as she turns away from the painting.
Anton will walk to the painting, kind of giving an upturned nose as he walks by, as you have upset his lover. He will grab the painting and walk to the fireplace and just throw it in. Just kind of stand there and watch it burn.
Meanwhile, Aveline has just completely moved on. She comes and stands in front of you, and she looks at you, Fleur, and she goes, well, the muse may have left you, but at least there's still one thing of beauty in this room. Perhaps we should fix a few things. Anton, would you bring us the stool over there, please? Fleur, please disrobe and stand on the stool.
Fleur, there's a tightness in her jaw, but also this feeling deep inside of her that she just wants to please the woman in front of her. So without any sort of hesitation, she disrobes and takes a seat on the stool.
She looks at you like she would look at any work of art. You are, of course, exquisitely beautiful, one of the reasons why she chose you. But there's still a bit of a critical look in her eye. She's like, so near perfection. The only problem, of course, is that the ideal of perfection changes all the time. I am told that in Paris right now, the women are preferred to be a little wider in the hips, and as she brings her hands down over your hips, you feel the bones and the flesh there start to rearrange itself. There's not a tremendous amount of pain. You get the feeling there could be a lot of pain, but she's doing it in a way that doesn't bring you too much discomfort. Anton, you watch as Fleur imperceptibly shrinks a little bit as some of the flesh and bone that is needed to widen her hips a little bit is taken from her height. And then she walks around you and she touches little places and you feel little adjustments in the skin, sometimes in the bone. She looks at your nose very critically and she's like, I feel like I'm fixing this every other month or so. And she runs a very gentle land on it, but you feel the cartilage in the nose kind of pop and snap as it rearranges itself and forms itself into something that, at least for tonight, she finds more perfect. She'll go around you making small little adjustments like this, and you feel like one of your paintings must feel sometimes, perhaps. What's going through your mind as all this is happening, as this pain is going through, as your body's being readjusted and changed?
There's a sort of sadness within Fleur. Much of her mortal life had been spent making it so that her worth, her value, was not in her looks, but in her talents. And without this talent, this is all she is left with. And she wants so desperately to please Aveline. She wants her approval. She wants to be adored in the way that she adores Aveline. And so she lets it happen.
What's Anton thinking as he's watching this? You've never had to see it actually really happen. You've seen the effects of it before, but you've never actually seen her work. What's going through Anton's mind?
He internally almost smirks a little bit, knowing the pain that must be happening. Enjoys the fact that she's being made correctly now. She's being fixed in the eyes of The only one who understands what true beauty should look like.
And after perhaps 10-15 minutes of this, she will sit back and look at you the way a sculptor would look at a sculpture, or a painter at a painting, and go, well, again, near perfect, better than it was. I'll tell you what, Fleur, you best be looking for your muse and make sure you find her, because I can't keep doing this forever and ever. We have things to do.
Mistress.
Sorry. Yeah, we have things to do. Please dress yourself. Anton, help her if she needs help.
He will just kind of stand staring.
Flora will wave him away as she gathers her clothes.
As you're getting dressed, seeing that you've shooed Anton away, Aveline will go, Anton, would you fetch me that painting over there, please? No, not that one. The one next to it.
Yes, milady. And he will slowly pull it off the wall and bring it back to her, holding it so she can see it.
It is a painting of the Madonna with the Holy Child in her hands, but as you bring the painting to Aveline, Anton, you can't help but notice how much the Madonna looks like Odette. It's almost as if she had posed for this image, and this is what Fleur had painted, and you can feel, even in your state, you are still Bruja. Passion is still very much a part of your being, and you can't help but feel the passion and attention to detail and love that went into this painting. And as Fleur finishes dressing, Aveline looks at the painting and goes, where did you go wrong? You used to have such talent. This is truly beautiful, Fleur.
I'm sorry, mistress. I will find it once more, I promise.
See to it that you do, and you see that her finger elongates and the bone starts to protrude out of the finger a little bit, and she scratches the paint across the face of the Madonna.
As the sound of her nail against the canvas, Fleur, she jumps a little. Not quite expecting her to do that.
Let's go. We have several things to accomplish tonight, and she drops the painting on the ground. Come along.
And Anton steps on the painting as he follows her out.
What does Fleur do?
Before she leaves the room, she's going to pick the painting up and sort of just set it gently against the wall, tracing over the scratch mark that Aveline had left.
You will, all of you, go down the tower and into the courtyard. As soon as you step outside and feel the light of the moon on your skin, just being outside those walls where there's so much horror these days feels already a little bit like a victory, and you feel it's not that you're out there breathing in the night air or anything, but there is a slight sense of escape, of freedom that does sort of seep into you. You approach the chapel, and as you approach, Aveline says, Anton, would you open the door, please?
Cool. He will go and pull the door open for her.
As you open the door, all three of you will see further into the chapel. you see this copper bathtub. There is a ray of moonlight that's coming in from one of the stained glass windows that has been unblocked for this particular purpose, that brings in a little bit of light just right in the nave area of the church. And in this copper bathtub with her back to you, you see Odette, and you see one of her servants kneeling next to her, making the sign of the cross, and another one is feeding from Odette's hand. Odette, you feel a slight breeze as the door is open on the back of your neck, and you see the shadow fall on you as you hear the footsteps come into the church. With a voice that barely rises but contains a fair amount of anger in it, Aveline says, "Odette, what in the name of Christ Almighty do you think you're doing?"
Odette will, without jerking her hand away, she'll pull her hand away from the handmaiden feeding it and sort of hold it in her palm, or her fingers curled into her palm, and she will turn to look at the group. And she will make the sign of the cross, and she will say, "My lady, John 6:35, Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst." And she is earnest in this response, and sort of leans into it. And she doesn't quite look at any three of them. She looks just past them as if she's looking for something to be there.
Aveline walks up, grabs the servant that was drinking from you by the neck, lifts her up off the ground, and says, "Even in this place, you will not quote scriptures at me." And she reaches and hands the servant, who's now squirming her legs, kicking at the air, just holds it up, and is just waiting for Anton.
Anton will catch eyes with Odette for a moment as he reaches up and grabs by the throat the servant, and with his free hand reach behind him and pull out a small dagger. He will take the dagger and run it right across her belly button lightly. And then right as he goes to the side, he will enter and stab directly into the gut, eviscerating the servant as you watch the intestines fall to the floor. And he will just kind of sit there and stare at her in the eye as he watches the life drain from her.
Odette quickly signs again and says, "Nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti," and makes a crying sound from her throat, almost in the pain that a mother might have felt in seeing her child taken from her. And tears well up in her eyes, and she looks back to Fleur with great panic and confusion. She does not know why they did this.
Fleur's going to attempt to make her way over to Odette.
As you do, Aveline will raise a finger at you.
She immediately freezes.
"Anton, put that piece of meat in the tub, would you please? It needs to be cleansed."
Anton will continue holding it with one arm over his head, kind of continuing to make eye contact as he walks towards the tub. And then right as he gets there, he will turn to catch eyes at Odette as he throws the body into the tub, and then returns to Aveline's side.
Odette,
Sorry, go ahead.
Odette, in a very brief moment of anger and rage, she will then quote scripture again. I confess my iniquity. I am full of anxiety because of my sin. And she will point to you, Anton, and say, this is your future. This is going to be your life.
He will look at you, eyes somewhat flittering back and forth between you and Aveline, almost like what you said struck a nerve, but he won't dare let Aveline see that. And he will just somewhat kind of look at you and scoff as he continues past.
Aveline will look at you and say, I will expect you, and then look at Fleur and you in the main hall before the next bell. Now, Anton, pick up the body, we're taking it with us. And Fleur,
Yes.
help this filthy whore clean this place up before you return to the manor.
Of course, mistress.
Before the next bell. And she leans into you, Odette. My blood is the only one the servants drink. Do you understand me? There is power in blood that one such as you can never hope to understand, perhaps. If you live another 100 or 200 years, you may. But until such time, and while you are under my roof, you will not feed the serpents. Is that clear?
Odette sort of turns her head to the side to speak and knits her brows together, still teary-eyed and sniffling in a sort of odd way, though nothing seems to be quite there. And she will nod and say, forgive me, my lady. I have forgotten myself.
And with a final glance of warning, she'll look at Anton to make sure he picks up the body and will exit the chapel.
Anton will grab the body from the tub and just, not picking it all the way up, just dragging it out by the arm.
The two of you will be left... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please. I was just going to say we'll return to you, but if you want to throw something in there before we move on to creep.
Once the two of them leave, Odette will run straight for Fleur. That's immediately.
Fleur already has her arms waiting as soon as she hears the door shut behind them.
And on this gentle embrace, which we will return to momentarily, we watch Anton dragging the body behind him as he follows Aveline across the main courtyard, back into the manor, down the side, through the kitchen, to where the servants' entrance is. You will approach the entrance, and Aveline will stand there, impassive, very quiet. Will Anton say anything in this moment, or will he wait?
Anton's currently running a lot of iterations of what just happened through his brain. He's used to the violence. He's used to the feeling, but he's internally right now having a bit of an issue with some things. He would never do anything to hurt his lady, but deep down he feels like he's being held down so much. He's not sure exactly what to do. He's With his free hand, he's digging his nails into his hand. You'll watch as small amounts of blood start to pour out and trickle to the ground. He shouldn't have these feelings. These are wrong. This is bad. Why does he feel like what he's doing isn't what he should be doing all of a sudden? And he'll continue to kind of sit there and just mash his fingers and fingernails into his hand until his hand is just covered in blood. Just trying to satiate whatever this feeling is that has him questioning things.
You see that she picks up. She is very intuitive, or she has powers, perhaps. She seems to always kind of know exactly what's going on in people's heads around her, but you see that she picks up, and she kind of looks over your shoulder, or shoulder at you, and you kind of feel like she's checking to see if she has to be worried, but then realizes she doesn't. And just as she turns away, the door opens, and Agravain, you walk into the little cellar, the entrance of the servants' quarter, to find Aveline waiting there for you, and Anton holding a dead servant. I guess by the head, perhaps, or the leg, and he's been dragging it behind him, and
Agravain is not surprised by the face he's greeted with. And he's going to stop before Aveline. I assume you have a job for me.
how is my most beautiful boy doing tonight? She gives you this smile that just sort of darkens the room almost.
You flatter me.
Oh, it's not flattery. I do find you the most exquisite-looking creature on these grounds. I wish that you would not hide your face so. However, as you so rightfully pointed out, I do have a small task for you. You will notice, no doubt, that Anton is something that needs disposing of.
An accident?
Let's just say it was a event of righteous retribution. God works in mysterious ways, you know. Tell me if you heard anything from your little network of rats that scurry through the walls.
But, does this ring a bell for you, Aveline?
Bonhomme. Well, not just for me, but I would assume that the name Jacques Bonhomme also rings a bell for our friend Anton here. At the mention of your sire, Anton, how do you react?
You're gonna watch as Anton's currently has the body by the wrist, just kind of dragging it. Gonna kind of take his foot, which is right beside the head, and just kind of start digging his toe into the eye. Not the name I wanted to hear.
Tell me, Agravain, has the yellow-bellied bastard returned then?
It's the rumor. There's someone here. They're organizing. 2 days.
The peasants are organizing, do you say?
Seems so.
Well then, I guess we better pack our bags and leave. They will be upon us at any moment with pitchforks and torches, no doubt. Don't worry your pretty little head about the peasants, Sir Knight. I
Do
have,
I look worried to you,
well,
Aveline?
I don't know what you look like. You're constantly hiding your beautiful face away. It is very difficult to read your feelings. But fret not, I have a plan. The peasants will not do to our fine little county what they've done in other places. But for now, this body needs disposing of. I'm assuming that the peasants will be on the lookout for any opportunity to discover things that may embolden them some more. So make sure you dispose of this one very well. And then I need the two of you to return and meet me in the hall before the next bell. I have something of importance to impart to you. Don't make me wait.
I do not plan to.
Anton, go with Agravain. Get rid of this. Oh, you will also find another 3 bodies in the chute, fresh from last night. Dispose of those also, would you?
Yes.
Very well. Set to it then. I'll await all of you in the hall. She turns and walks back without another look over her shoulder.
Can I go get the others while you ready it?
Agravain, his eyes just kind of run up, then down, Anton, and then rest on his eyes. I will meet you in the courtyard. And he's just gonna turn and walk back out.
Anton will make his way to the chute and grab the other 3 bodies. He's got.
When you open the chute, well, you'll tell me how you react. You find 3 bodies there, but they are fused, melded into one multi-limbed and multi-headed mockery of the physical form. There is an artistry to how these bodies have been fused and melded together. There are no seams. You can't really tell where one body begins and the other one ends. They are naked, of course, 2 women and 1 man, fairly young, from the village nearby, you assume. It is grotesque, but at the same time, there is an underlying beauty in it. The curves, how the bodies are placed together, the artistic choices made. They, of course, also show several signs of tortures and bite marks and other things, and have been exsanguinated thoroughly. There's nothing left in there. How does Anton react upon seeing this?
Upon opening the chute and seeing this beautiful abomination, he will take a step back, hold the chute door open, and just kind of stand there staring at it for a moment. It's strange. He's revolted and impressed at the same time. The mother does good work. And as he begins kind of pulling it from the chute and trying to figure out the best way to carry it while dragging the other body behind him, I've never seen one this bad before. I do hope she's okay. And he's going to start kind of dragging the one body while, I won't say fumbling, but working in a very difficult manner to make it look like he knows what he's doing while he's pulling this abomination towards the courtyard.
And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just slowly, one step at a time. The whole time, they're getting worse. And then he'll be hit with that feeling again of, why are they getting worse? What is happening? And you just kind of, his head is spiraling right now. He doesn't know what to feel or what to think. And every time he thinks the wrong thing, he finds a way to cause himself pain.
And as you walk across the courtyard with this burden upon you, like some weird sort of peasant perhaps heading to the fields with his tools and his bags of seeds and so on and so forth, you will head down to find Agravain. And I think this is a good time for us to take a short break here. I want to, first of all, thank you so much, my players, for your patience and waiting for all these introductions, but also for the fantastic work you did. These characters are already kind of indelible. Thank you so much for everyone watching. We appreciate you, all the bits that were thrown at the players. Absolutely amazing. All the subscriptions, everything. So we will take a short break here. We will be back in a few minutes. Please hang out. We have more weirdness to come. And thank you so much for hanging out. We'll catch y'all in just a few minutes. say something terrible to Maxar. Thank you so much, Pixie Lady, for explaining my Frenchisms to everybody. Yes, Crevecoeur. It's a bit of a play on words. The name of the manor. We're just about ready to come back here and start this thing. So, hope everyone is enjoying this business. I know I am. I'm sitting here watching these amazing people play these fantastic characters. It's been great. It's a beautiful time. So just a very quick recap. We basically just met the 4 characters in this manner. We know that there's some sort of peasant revolution that's maybe about to begin. We know that Aveline, the lady of the manor, is not too stressed about it. We also know that even though the group is blood bonded to Aveline, that she's quite terrible to them, and I don't know. There's probably a little bit of love-hate action going on there. Myriad is playing Fleur, who is Aveline's child, but the others, as we may discover, are other vampires who have sort of fallen under Aveline's sway over the years for one reason or another. So thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out with us. We will sort of get right back into it here as we leave momentarily the charnel pit where Anton is marveling at Mother's work and return to the chapel perhaps a few minutes earlier as we see, and I have a special theme that I picked out for you guys in the music I'm going to play. As we see in the chapel, Fleur and Odette, who after the scene with the bathtub and the dead servant, the other servant has just run off and is gone out through the side door, fearing for her life. The smell of blood is heavy in the chapel because of the evisceration, as the two of you in this colored moonlight that is coming down through the stained glass window that Odette always likes to have uncovered once night has fallen, falls down right upon the two of you as you are embracing, holding each other. What happens?
Fleur is almost cradling Odette, running her hand over her hair, whispering to her, trying to get her to settle her tears and her sadness, mostly.
Odette is sort of mumbling to Fleur, indistinguishable. She's almost drawing away some, but also kind of going back into Fleur. And she looks up to her with those wide doe eyes and says, "Would you help me dress?"
Of course, Mamoti.
And she'll finally draw away and then sort of look around. She's looking for something suitable to wear, and most importantly, her veil, her rosary. Those
Fleur
things
is
that
going to gather her underdress and everything and start to, as she's looking for, as you're looking for your veil and rosary, she's kind of following you and putting on your underdress.
I think once she's dressed, she will sort of, she'll have the rosary in hand, and she sort of is like curling in towards Fleur, and she's praying. She's doing the Hail Holy and muttering to herself, and "Hail Holy, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, hail of our life, our sweetness, and our hope." And she sort of just trails off
To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this vale of tears.
She sighs and looks to Fleur and nods and continues her prayers and finishes them with the sign of the cross and in nomine Patris, et Filii Spiritus Sancti. And she does not want anything other than to be touching Fleur, and she's constantly touching her.
Fleur is at this point, I imagine they've taken a seat in one of the chapel pews. She's taken out some pieces of paper that she grabbed from her room prior and is sort of staring ahead at the chapel and at the stained glass, just sort of absent-mindedly, just scrawling on the paper with some charcoal.
Odette will be at your feet, her chin resting on your knee, sort of looking up at you, doting, really, and her hands resting on your thighs. And she'll just say, I don't understand. I did nothing wrong.
Of course you did not. But you know, Mistress Aveline, she has rules.
I do not want to disobey. However, I follow the law of Christ and that of the Catholic Church.
While we are here, we also need to abide by her rules, Odette. She has been good to us. She has given us a home. She's given us each other.
And Odette, at that, will be almost completely her top half in your lap, looking up at you, and has moved between your legs, and is sort of idly playing with any loose strings or anything on your clothes, and sort of hems and haws over that, and she'll say, I would trade nothing for you.
Fleur is going to sort of set her piece of charcoal down, and grasping your chin with her charcoal stained hands. She will lean down and press a kiss to your forehead. And I you.
Odette will kiss you, and chaste in a way. And she smiles as if she would forgotten all of what Aveline had done, and look back to the chapel and say, I would like to very much find peace here under Aveline. For as much good as she has done, I would be remiss if I did not say I wish to make this place a place of holiness once more. It is what Christ would want me to do, and our Mother Mary, I wish to see her again.
Have you spoken to Aveline about fixing up the chapel?
No. I don't know what her receptiveness would be of that.
Well, it can't hurt for the most part to ask. I mean, if you promise to make it beautiful.
Anything in Christ's light and with the vision of Mother Mary would be beautiful.
Laura's going to smile down on you and press another kiss to your lips.
Odette's going to lay her head on your thigh, and sort of there's a playfulness to her in that moment. And she'll say, what is it, do you think, that has brought us together in our friendship?
Flora's going to sort of look away. a knit in her brows. This is something that she's never really contemplated before. You appeared one day and that was it. She felt instantly drawn to you. She's going to sort of smile, thinking about the day that we had met. Well, besides your hair, of course, it's most beautiful. It's the way that you speak. The words you say, the visions you have, they're inspiring.
There's something suddenly very sheepish about Odette, and she sort of curls in closer towards you, and she says, I can't see her again. I have been looking.
Perhaps she will come to you in a time of need. Perhaps you haven't seen her because you don't need to see her.
I believe this is a test from God.
Testing your faith.
My embrace, I think, was the first test. Falling here, the second. Finding her Holy Mother is the third.
What will happen after the third test?
Odette looks beyond you and sees nothing else except for the darkness in which she has been left by Christ. And she signs the cross again.
Or knows when Odette has sort of gone from herself, and so she'll settle back down and begin to scrawl some more sketches with one hand and softly petting Odette's hair with the other.
And as the two of you find comfort these dark times together, you suddenly, Odette, hear coming from the shadows inside the confessional box, near where the two of you are sitting. Please pardon my interruption. I realize I came in on a very private moment, but, well, it was so beautiful and heartwarming that I could not make myself look away. I mean no disrespect.
Nothing is private in the eyes of the Lord.
I unfortunately fear the Lord has long ago turned his eyes away from me.
At this, Odette immediately stands and is clutching her rosary and is approaching this voice.
And as you do, you see first a pair of eyes from the shadows, and then as if leaning out of those shadows, a man's face appears, dark skin, long dark hair. He leans forward, he's got a nice little beard that's well oiled. And as he leans forward, you recognize Santiago. My dear Odette, I hope you have not forgotten me, even though it has been, almost 10 years now.
There's a squeal of joy from her, and she runs towards him. And in her earnestness and perhaps goodness, she runs to hug him and embrace him tightly.
He steps fully out of the shadow. He is dressed very finely. He's got a nice big cloak of some dark velour that seems to absorb the light around him. And he stands up. He's very tall, very slim, and he just sweeps you up into his arms, and you smell that scent of him, that mixture of this cologne and all these strange, almost mystical scents that just seem to consistently surround him, that just kind of almost inebriate you as you come close to him. It's like, I am delighted to find you apparently so happy. I was expecting to find you in a very dour mood. Uh, he'll look at Florence, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And Fleur will sort of do like a little curtsy to him, much more reserved now.
He will bow very formally to you. Again, please pardon my interruption. I won't interrupt very long. You seem to be very comfortable here together like this. I simply wanted to drop in and say I'm somewhat busy tonight, but I would very much love to catch up with you, to see you if you have time, perhaps tomorrow night.
Odette is nodding. I would like that very much. We have much to discuss.
Absolutely, and of course, Fleur, I would absolutely love if you were to accompany Odette to our little meeting. We'll simply be talking about old times. I'll tell you all about my recent voyages. I've traveled far to the east. I've seen many wonders. You should definitely consider taking your own little jaunt out there someday, but I can, for now at least, paint a picture. Oh, Constantinople. I've been to Constantinople. You should see the most beautiful of cities. I will tell you all about it, and I have brought you things also, little trinkets. I would love to give them to you.
Please.
Will you come and meet me tomorrow, perhaps a few hours before dawn? Let's say the old tower. It's not very far from here, perhaps a mile off. Do you know it?
I do, and I will.
Bring your friends also. The angry one and the one who likes to hide in the crypt. Anton and what's his name? The knight Agravain, Sir Agravain. Yes, how could I forget? I have things to tell you that I think all of you will find very important. I was here earlier. I saw what Aveline has become. I think perhaps I may have an answer, a suggestion for you, something you could do to rectify the situation.
Odette recoils at the idea of bringing Anton with her and shakes her head.
What is the matter?
He is cruel.
Which one, the knight or the other one?
And
The dog.
A dog with a cruel master learns to be cruel. But by their very nature, dogs are not cruel. They can be taught to stand up for themselves. Again, with a sure hand and with, well, a bit of care.
I will consider bringing Anton, but I will be there, and Fleur will be there. Agravain, we will see. I will try.
Or not. Agravain does pretty much as Agravain wants, I believe. I'm pretty sure that even if Agravain is not there, he'll be there. He has a way of finding where he needs to be. I will tell you this, my dear Odette. I swear right here to you in front of God himself in this place, if he is still here, that if Anton attempts in any way, shape, or form to harm you, or your friend Fleur, you will have to answer to me. And he will find me a very strict master also.
That sort of fidgeting with her rosary will nod again and say, I trust you, Santiago.
Does he seem earnest in what he's saying?
Yeah, he's got, I would say he's got a bit of a, you know, I don't say an oiliness to him, but he's got like, he's a charmer. Like it's clear that, he's a bit of a charmer, but he, as a Toreador and with your powers and just with as an artist and someone who's a fairly keen observer of people, you would certainly, I think, detect that he means what he says, and he is genuinely caring of Odette.
I think seeing the earnestness in his eyes as he says this, and how he regards Odette, Fleur, who was very much a bit on guard, softens a bit to this man.
The flower opens up, so much more beautiful when the petals bloom and turn their face to the light.
A small smile sort of forms on her lips. Clearly, she is not immune to sweet words.
He will take your hand, Odette, and he will place something in it, and you will curl your fingers over it, and he'll say, we meet tomorrow. Let's say halfway through the night, perhaps, at the old tower, whenever you are able. If you're not there when I arrive, I will wait. I will wait until the very last minute before the sun comes up. I do look forward to seeing you. It's been too long.
Odette will sort of clasp her hand tight around whatever it is that he's given her, and she will lean in and kiss his cheek and say, it is so good to see your face once more. I will see you tomorrow then.
And my dear Odette, your presence alone reminds me that whether or not he's still here, we cannot know, but there was once, at least, a god. Have a good evening. Ta-ta, Fleur. And he steps back into the shadows of the confessional, and the last thing you see is his eyes as he winks at you. And then you just see the shadows in the corner of the confessional.
Odette looks back at Fleur and then at her hand and slowly uncurls her fingers.
You see in your hand is a very incredibly delicate carved crucifix. It's impossible for you to tell its provenance. You'll probably have to ask him, but the exquisiteness of it, the detail work, as you bring it into the light and look into it, you see incredibly small, very, very, very fine carvings throughout the entire cross. A language you can't read, but the effect of it is absolutely stunning, because as you move it into the light, the carvings of the letters, when they catch the light a certain way, the shadows form the form of Christ on the cross. And when you move it again into the light, then you can see that they become letters again. And it is very small, very, very, very fine.
Odette realizes immediately that this is something perhaps special. At least to her, it's special. And she's going to tuck it away into her stay and to try and keep it as safe and away from anyone else. And she will look back to Fleur and say, Santiago is a friend.
Peculiar man. You trust him?
Perhaps. Without second thought. Santiago is kind, even though there's times where I am scared and I can't find God. Santiago is there at most moments.
Flora's gonna smile fondly at Odette and grab her hand and begin to lead her out of the chapel so that they can make it to the main hall before the next bell.
Once she touches her hand, Odette sort of draws in close behind Fleur, as almost using her as a shield from what might be before them. And she will say in Fleur's ear, "But I am not scared with you. I know that God looks upon us when I am in your presence."
He knows I will protect you.
Warrior Christ. My warrior.
Your warrior. She will continue to walk.
And from this scene of quiet beauty, we travel about half a mile away from the manor. There's a pit, a sort of charnel pit where during the years of the Black Plague, the bodies of those infected were stacked one upon the other and burnt to prevent further infection. It didn't really help, but, well, it makes it a pretty good spot now for Agravain and Anton. Anton's still carrying the 4 bodies. 3 of them sort of melded together into this one grotesque sculpture. One of them an eviscerated servant. To do their dirty work. And the 2 of you find yourselves on the edge of this pit, and you can still smell the smoldering remains of the bodies that you burnt yesterday. Aveline's appetite seemed to be growing. Used to be that perhaps once a month you would make a pilgrimage here to this charnel pit, and then it was once a week, and now it's basically nightly. What do you do?
The pit itself, is it kind of always burning at this point?
Definitely in the past few weeks when you've been coming here nightly, there's always a little bit of that smoke, that smell of burnt flesh. They're carrion birds and other animals that at this point are so used to you that they don't even bother fleeing. They just sort of step aside and wait for you to finish your work before they can resume feasting.
Will we need to feed this fire at all?
You would probably need to, yeah. It's not so much a fire anymore as it's just sort of the smoke that has kind of gotten caught in the cloud that it's wafting. But yeah, you'll definitely need to fire this up. No pun intended.
I'm assuming the groundskeepers have some sort of wood pile that's next to this that's prepared for us.
Everything you need. There are axes and machetes if you need to dismember the corpses. There are shovels if you want to bury stuff. There's everything you need there. In fact, you could probably have a groundskeeper with you if you wanted a ghoul that would have just followed you with a wheelbarrow full of whatever tools you normally use. Also useful for setting fires because vampires on fire.
I imagine Anton is a bit of ways back from Agravain. Agravain would have reached the pit first, as he just kind of left Anton to collect the bodies. And while he's waiting for Anton to arrive, he wouldn't have invited anybody along. Okay. He wouldn't have asked for any help. He would have created this fire on his own. And by the time Anton arrives, he's steadily feeding that charcoal that's still burning to some degree logs of wood and inciting a fresh fire to rise. He doesn't, where a normal vampire would likely shrink away from this, Agravain seems almost entranced by the fire and placing logs into it. There's no fear in his eyes as he does this task. It's almost as if he likes to do this job. He enjoys it to a degree.
And as you approach Anton, the first thing I would like you to do, Anton, is I'm going to give you a choice to either give me a courage roll, or if you want, you can spend a willpower, or if you want, you can spend one of the advantages that you got. If you spend a willpower or the advantage, it will automatically succeed at your courage roll, or if you want, you can make just a courage roll.
We'll do one of the advantages.
Okay. As you see the fire spring to life, perhaps kind of not unexpectedly, because you know Agravain at this point, the sight of it still is a very primal fear for vampires and even for you, but at this point, kind of getting used to it, you see the flame spring up and maybe you kind of recoil a bit, but you kind of strengthen yourself. What do you do as you approach laden with these bodies and see Agravain tending this fire?
Anton's gonna stop and just kind of watch for a moment. For all of their almost skulking, there's beauty in the way that they control this chaos. He finds it very interesting, the way Agravain can take something as primordial and fearful to him as fire and turn it into something almost beautiful from a distance. And he will kind of slowly begin walking that way. His time is of the essence, but he will take his time getting there, kind of just watching the beauty of the fire respectfully and fearfully. And his eyes will gaze down to Agravain. He's always felt a little uneasy around Agravain, almost fear and respect for him as he does the fire itself. And he will slowly just kind of continue walking towards the fire, mulling over the day's events and kind of the situation he finds himself in again.
Agravain can feel him approaching, and he would also recognize the fear that most vampires would have for fire, and he would turn and stand from the fire and meet Anton a bit of a ways off from the fire, not directly next to it. And I feel they've done this multiple times together. It's almost routine for them at this point that Agravain would meet him a bit of a ways from the fire to collect the bodies, and he would grab them one by one and bring them to the fire pit to throw in so that Anton would not have to get as close as he does.
This one's special. Never seen her work quite like this. As he kind of nudges to the three bodies amalgamated into the statue or whatever it may be.
Her work seems to evolve.
Seems like we have these more often now.
Yes. Like we're here every night. It's almost as though it's become a ritual.
Yes, well. You said something earlier. My old master's back.
Your master?
My old master, Aveline, is my master now.
Would Agravain have known this, Bleak?
Yeah, you know that Anton was sired by someone named Jacques Bonhomme, and that for a while they were kind of rampaging through the countryside, a sort of early precursor to the peasant revolt that's brewing right now. But they were much more kind of like brigands operating as, under the guise of a revolt, but they would target manors and isolated manors and isolated castle and just attack them and rob them basically. But when they showed up here, Aveline had been waiting for them and had made a deal with Jacques Bonhomme, and he betrayed uh, his childer, who is Anton, and the ghouls and the other followers that they had with him, because they were mostly humans and ghouls that were in this crew, aside from Anton and Jacques Bonhomme. And he had betrayed them, and he turned them over. And Aveline had them all put to death, and except Anton, that she kept, blood bonding him in the process.
Tell me, Anton, how does it make you feel knowing he could return?
You're gonna watch as Anton kind of almost averts his gaze from you. Begins to fidget a bit as he physically looks like the embodiment of anger in that moment. Like he wants to let out just a furious roar. He won't return. But I would like for him to no longer breathe, so to speak.
What makes you so sure he will not return?
I'm not the same as when he left me. Things change. And with that, Anton's going to you're going to watch as he slowly kind of calms down, at least a little bit. The rage somewhat subsiding. Things are not what. Kind of stumbles over his words for a moment as he kind of looks straight at Agravain directly in the eye. You ever had someone you just wanted to end?
Plenty.
Well, that's mine.
I see. He abandoned you.
He
And now
betrayed
you're
me.
betrayal. Now you're just a very good dog.
We all do our part. We do them well.
Some of us perhaps do our part too well. Agravain's gonna take one of the bodies and start walking it to the pit to throw in.
Anton's just going to stand back and kind of kick the other one, kind of getting out some of his frustration.
For how long and sinewy Agravain is, he does seem somewhat impressively strong as he just kind of takes the body and hurls it into the pit on the fire.
The sparks fly around it, and right away you can smell the flesh start to burn and blacken, as the fire that you had going was already quite hot. Um, the by now all too familiar smell of the flesh burning reaches your nose, and thankfully as a vampire you don't need to breathe, so you can just shut it out. You watch as the fire starts to consume this body, and for a moment, Agravain, you are taken back to another moment in time. You see yourself surrounded by pyres. You see men, women, and children chained to these pyres. You see wood being fed into the flames. You see the flames eat away at these heretics, chained to these stakes in this act of faith. The same smell, the same sounds, except these ones, well, don't scream. Anton behind you is still holding that strange amalgamation of 3 bodies. As you come back from this momentary trip down memory lane, Agravain, you perhaps look over to signal to Anton to bring the horror that he's holding in his hands to the pyre. And Anton, as you lift it up, suddenly it starts to move, and one of the mouths starts to scream, and you hear, no, 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 as it's clear that one of the parts that's melded together of these 3 creatures is still alive. The face looks animated with fear, and one of the legs and a random arm from somewhere trying to kind of ineffectually beat at you, trying to sort of just get you to let them go as you are holding aloft this strange monstrosity of 3 people sort of fused and melded together. What do you do? No, no, oh God above, oh Christ.
Immediately drop it. Been a while since she hasn't finished them pulling off. And I'll pull out the dagger that I used earlier.
As you approach with the dagger, he starts reciting in Latin a prayer that you've heard Odette recite before. You remember this prayer, and you recall that it's a prayer begging for the Lord to gather him into the light and to bring him surcease from his pain and suffering.
You don't need the Lord to stop your suffering, and I will shove the dagger into it. The amalgamation in the area it's moving.
You stab, find some resistance for your knife, but he's still screaming. Apparently whatever organ you've hit, it was not his.
Agravain, do you have any ideas?
Agravain is going to step forward, and he's going to reach into the mouth of the screaming man and grab it by the tongue and rip it out and toss it into the fire.
Blood.
There's no God here. Do as you're told, Anton. Toss it into the fire.
He will toss it.
The now jawless creature manages still to scream a little bit as the flames start eating at the body, and it isn't very long before the screams are altered. However, as the screams die out, can I get each of you to give me a roll? You will give me please give me a perception plus investigation roll. So you roll a number of d10s equal to your attribute plus the ability.
Wait. D10's the number of the attribute?
Plus your ability. So perception plus investigation.
Okay. So that's 7 for me.
So roll that.
7 D10s?
Yep.
Sheesh. All right.
Yep.
I wasn't prepared for that. Okay, hold on.
I have my number.
Oh boy. That's 48.
Oh, sorry, you don't have to add it.
I don't add it?
No, sorry. You're looking for anything that's 5 or above, but 1s cancel out 5s and above. So figure out how many 5s and above you have minus whatever ones you have and tell me
5.
if you have anything left. All
5.
right. Excellent.
Yeah.
Anton, are you rolling?
Yep. I have to redo it because I added them. 1 second.
Yeah, sorry. I was saying earlier, like, it's not a system that we're very familiar with. We're just going to kind of wing it a little bit.
Two.
That's good enough. Both of you at the same time, your heads swivel and you see, back turned to you, someone has just darted off. Someone was nearby, and at the sight of this thing screaming and being thrown up, Pyrus decided to take off running and is heading back away out from this in sort of the general direction of the village. What do you do?
You did say to do it well this time. And Anton's going to take off after them.
You're going to spend a bit of blood and activate your celerity?
Yes.
In a feat of superhuman speed, Anton darts out after this man who's running and catches him. The man takes 4 or 5 steps and Anton has covered the distance to him. Grabs him. What do you do with him? He's just, no, please, no. He's some young man from the village.
I'm gonna grab him kind of by the collar of whatever he's wearing, hold him up a little bit off the ground and just kind of drag him backwards towards the fire.
Oh, please let me go. Oh, by the grace of God, please.
And Anton's going to kind of glance over at Agravain for...
Yeah, once Anton tackles him, Agravain is just leisurely walking in that direction. And he's going to pause and kind of look down at the man. Do I recognize him at all?
He's one of the young men from the village, one of the farmer's sons. Not someone that you've necessarily interacted with or kind of part of your little network of spies, but you know who he is. No one of great importance, just a peasant.
What does he look like? Is he handsome?
He is fairly handsome in that sort of square-jawed, country boy. Got long hair and a ponytail. He's dressed very much like a commoner, with just some nothing fancy, just some farmer's garbs or something. He's a little dirty, obviously. But Wesley at the beginning of The Princess Bride, when he's the farm boy.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Agravain is just looking down to him. Were you gonna say something, Bleak?
No, he's just, please, in the name of God, let me go. I saw nothing. I know nothing.
Do you hear that, Anton? In the name of God, he begs.
Please.
Should we answer his prayer.
Yes. Send him to his god.
No, please, I can be useful to you. I can be useful to you. I know my friend Adalbert works for you. I can work for you as well. Please, just spare me.
Speak quickly. Time is ticking.
And Anton's got the dagger out in his hand, and he's kind of running it across his neck very lightly.
I know some of the other men in the village serve you. That's all I wish to do. I knew you came out here often at night, and please, I can work for you as much as they do. I can bring information or whatever else you need. The others in the village, they're getting ready to come and hurt you and
You tell me things I already know. Tell me something I don't know.
Anton's going to slightly press the dagger in.
Kill him.
No, please.
Anton cuts his throat and tosses him into the fire.
As you cut his throat, just before you toss him, as you cut his throat, he reaches out a hand towards you and looks like he's going to try to pull your face mask down, Agravain.
As he's doing this, I snap my hand out and grab him by the wrist. And I watch intently as the light leaves his eyes.
It isn't long before he is gone. And as you toss his body onto the others in the pyre, while he didn't bring you any new information, you are wise enough at this point to realize that there's too much has been going on. There's been too many murders, too many deaths, too many disappearances. This one on top of it, you're starting to understand that there's probably an actual threat or something really serious that is going to be brewing in the village. This can't go on. These incessant killings by Aveline, you can clearly see that you're just at that tipping point before the people, the fear that they have is replaced by the anger.
Agravain is back in front of the pyre now. And he's very close to it, just lost in thought as he stares into the fire. But he doesn't say anything. He's just silent.
Anton, you know that the bell will soon ring.
We should finish up here quickly. Bell tolls soon.
I feel as though I know what this meeting will be about. But we should go anyways. You did well, Anton.
And with those words, Anton's going to kind of tug at his shirt a little bit and kind of straighten himself up. I am a good dog. And he's going to kind of start digging his fingers into his nails into his palms again. And start walking towards the manor.
Agravain leaves as well, then heads towards the manor.
The stench of burning flesh follows you for several hundred feet before it leaves you. You find yourselves, all four of you now, in the main hall of the manor. Odette and Florence have been arrived earlier, Evan claimed. Perhaps some seats. This is a drawing rooms of sorts. There are several comfortable divans and to sit on. There's a little fireplace that is hidden. You can feel the heat of it, but the flames are hidden behind this mesh screen. There are books on the walls. There are several candles throughout the entire room. There are servants that bring you carafes of blood and the goblets to drink from them. And as Odette and Fleur, you are, let's do this then. Odette and Fleur, just before Agravain and Anton arrive, what are the two of you doing in the main hall?
I'll tell you, if Fleur is sitting, Odette is at her feet, sort of in that same position that they were in the chapel.
Florence is she is sitting, and she has the sketches that she had been working on in the chapel. They are turned over, clutched tightly in her hands. Unlike in the chapel, she's not petting Odette's head. She's sort of sitting very ramrod straight. There's tension in her. She knows that whatever Aveline has summoned them for, it's not going to be good for anyone involved.
I think Odette every so often will, doing Hail Marys or whatever prayers that she is doing through her rosary, will sort of look up at Fleur and sort of encourage her to pray along with her.
Fleur will sort of get snapped out of whatever trance she was in by Odette's request, and she'll nod, and as Odette falls into prayer, Fleur will join along.
And as the two of you are in the midst of your prayers, the first thing you will notice is the stench of burnt flesh that just sort of wafts into the room moments before a servant opens the door with a look of disgust on her face, nose wrinkled, and Anton and Agravain walk into the room carrying with them this smell of smoke and death.
Evening.
Agravain says nothing to the women. His eyes just kind of pass over them as he walks by. And he'll find his comfort standing in the shadows of the room, waiting for the mistress, Aveline, to make herself known.
As Anton walks by, just kind of catches eyes with both of them for a moment, and then walks to the area of the room he's pretty certain Aveline would be coming through, preparing for her presence.
Odette physically shirks away from you, Anton, but she watches Agravain as he goes to the whatever corner he finds best.
When Anton meets Flora's eyes, she holds his gaze. She, perhaps stupidly, is not afraid of him. Not afraid of the physical harm, at least. Because it's the mental harm that Aveline has done to her that affects her most. So even though he is this foreboding presence, she doesn't see him as a threat, but she is angry with him for causing Odette such distress earlier. So as he walks across the room, she will sort of hold his gaze, almost defiantly.
Anton's not unused, or he's used to people looking at him a certain way. He does what he's told to do, and he does it well. He will look at you and then kind of hearken back to the words that were spoken earlier. And for the first time, you see not only like a dull, inconsequential look in his eyes, but there's something different. And he will release your gaze and walk to the door. Just stand there.
A servant is going around the room, bringing each of you a goblet and then filling it with blood. Agravain, as the servant approaches you, they will lean in and very, very softly, so that only you can hear, will say to you, "We are to have guests tomorrow, too." And then move on. You have a few moments here before Aveline shows up. There are a few minutes before the bell. Does anyone want to do anything or say anything or engage in any sort of interaction, or do you just simply wait in comfortable silence?
Odette, in sort of a moment of mania, will look between Agravain and then very briefly to Anton. She will say, a close friend of mine has come. He's come to return and to visit. And she stops looking at Anton and looks directly at Agravain and says, he has some information. If he were to be visited with in the old tower?
Santiago has returned.
He has promised me presents and information.
Of course he has, child.
He wishes he wishes for all of us, and she very quickly darts to look at Anton and then back to you, Agravain. She does not want to look at Anton. She's very afraid of him and is oddly enough fascinated by you. She finds you very curious in this state. And perhaps unwisely gets to her feet and begins walking towards you, like lurching almost.
He watches her. His eyes are bored. He lets her come close. He doesn't do anything to stop her. Just stands.
She will close the distance between them and sort of softens, and being in small statures, cranes her neck up as she gets close to meet his gaze and says, "Would you come and visit with Santiago?"
Why do I need to visit with him?
He has asked for all of us to come. He has things to tell us, and he would not tell me in the chapel, and I would really appreciate to visit with him and to find these things out, but he did ask for all of us, and I would really like it if you would also come with us. And she sort of starts babbling about this as she's looking at her hands and fidgeting and isn't quite... You're losing her, basically.
Does Aveline know of his plans with us?
I have no idea. I don't know. He just came today to see me at the chapel, and I feel like God has told me to come and tell you that. And now you've lost her. She stopped completely in her voice and is looking at you with dead, empty eyes.
Do not bring the Lord into this, child.
She's going to reach out and touch you, or attempt to touch you, at least a small, soft hand to grab at yours.
He doesn't move.
There's a little flicker of light in her eyes. And you see the brain working. You see she's trying to think, but other things have sort of lost her. And the most she can mutter out to you is, "Would you visit?"
Agravain's going to lower himself slowly to her until he's but a few inches from her face. And very quietly, so that nobody else in the room can hear, he's going to whisper to her, "Your idol does not believe in your God. Yet you chase him round and round." And then he's going to slowly straighten himself. "I'll do as I wish."
She does not pull from you. And she knits her brows together and says, "I don't like it. You confuse me, Agravain. I need your help."
Your tears do not move me.
I do not expect them to. Would you help me? Regardless of tears or no tears, or God or no God, or Christ or no Christ, or blood or no blood.
Why should I help you?
Because I know you.
He thinks on this for a minute. You can see a bit of surprise in his eyes when you say that to him. And a bit of nervousness for maybe the first time this entire night. He very quickly regains his composure. "I will think on it. Let us hear what Aveline has to say. Go sit down."
Is his hand still blistered from the sun, I would imagine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't heal aggravated damage that easily.
She's going to take the blistered hand, if he allows it, and kiss it.
You can see a smile form on his eyes as she kisses his hand.
And just before stepping back, there is, for the briefest moment, you see something intelligent in Odette. Like she knows. She knows what that look of yours was. That was surprise. But in that same second, it's gone. The intelligence is gone, and all she has is God and her own personal madness. And she will step back and return to
I
her
will
place.
interject here before you do, as you, in that split moment between that sort of light being there and it disappearing, Odette, as you move back from having kissed Agravain's hand and give him that sly, knowing look, there is a moment where you see light start to shine behind Agravain. You take a step back and you reel. You feel the warmth of the sun on your skin. You smell again that smell of burning flesh, of burning wood assaulting your nose. You see standing before you a beautiful, beautiful man, a knight in armor that is uh, darkened with soot and blood. The tabard over it ripped in several places. The red cross over the white background in total tatters. The sword held limply in one hand, and this incredibly beautiful knight looks on as dozens of men and women are attached to burning pyres throughout a courtyard in a vast castle. And this knight looks upon this scene, and you can feel for a moment a mixture of doubt, of grief, of guilt. You feel very keenly the displeasure of God in this scene. You know that in this moment, God was incredibly displeased. He doesn't speak to you like he used to. You don't hear the voice. You don't hear that voice anymore. But you just know. And a moment later is when that look in your eyes goes. And this image you just saw, it's kind of like, when you were walked into a room because you wanted to do something and you get in the room and you don't remember what you wanted to do there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the feeling that sort of lingers with you, that there was something you were about to say or do or think, and it's just kind of evaporated, and the only thing that's left is the stench of burning flesh in your nose and a feeling of disappointment and guilt.
In a strange series of movements, Odette keeps her eyes on Agravain as she returns back to Fleur. And she's almost walking like she has forgotten how to act normally around others. She doesn't know what to do with her hands quite yet. And she gets low to the ground and lays sprawled out before Agravain. She is trying to almost act as the serpent in the story of Adam and Eve, the great sin. And she knows in that moment she will have to self-flagellate for this action, but she wants to do it either way because of that great disappointment that feels like such a burden upon her. And then she slowly turns back to Fleur to continue her prayers.
At that moment, reverberating through the entire manor is this scream, this cry of pain and anguish that starts low and distant and then seems to fill the entire manor, the room that you're in, all the walls, all the halls, the windows almost shake with it. This powerful scream goes through several different emotions. There is pain, there is anger, there's the wish to die, there is intense pleasure, there is agony, there is ecstasy. All these different emotions get mixed up in this scream that reverberates throughout the entire hall. You know that this is Geoffroy, the new child of Aveline, you have not seen him in several months. Almost as soon as he was embraced, Aveline had him placed in special rooms that she has that no one has access to, where she spends most of her nights now. You've heard his screams before, almost nightly. Some nights there are more screams of pain and anguish. Some nights there are more screams of pleasure. But tonight there is this entire mix of both. And as the scream dies down and is replaced by silence, you hear the footsteps of someone approaching. The door opens. Aveline steps in. As opposed to earlier, when she was so well put together and looked so refined, she looks almost like a feral beast, almost like she's somebody else. She is stark naked as she comes in, covered in blood from head to toe. Her face unrecognizable, a mask of just red that drips down. She is holding a goblet from which she is drinking blood. Her hands are claws. As she walks into the room, you see them revert back to her normal look. Her neck was about a foot too long, and as she steps into the room again, it sort of shrinks down and falls back into its normal. You hear the cartilage and the bones kind of pop. The skin is loose for a moment, but then tightens up around her. Her eyes had this distinctive alien look to them. They were elongated and went almost all the way around to the side of her head, and now they are returning to normal. Her hair was this wild mess, this huge tangle of almost living things, and suddenly they come back to her, except now they're drenched in blood. Her entire body had bony ridges sticking out through the various parts of the skin, and again, as she enters the room, these disappear, and she starts looking like herself again, except for her eyes. Her eyes remain these dark pits of utter darkness, and you've seen madness in Odette's eyes, and Odette, you know madness, but the depth of madness that you see in Aveline's eyes as she steps into the room, for a moment make you doubt the existence of God. Are we having fun then? Look at all of you gathered around for mommy.
Fleur, as soon as Aveline enters the room, she will get up from her seated position.
As you do so, the bell rings. The tolling of the bell that she had told it to me before. Well, at least you are on time. She extends a hand and a servant refills the goblet and she drains it and extends again. The servant is just trying not to look at her and is just trembling as they're pouring the blood into the cup. And she goes, Aveline sort of steps in the middle of the room and looks at all of you, and again she has this power of presence that is incredible, and even without the blood bond you would feel this kind of awe sort of staring at her. Well, attend me, all of you. It is time for you to drink. And she gestures as she likes for you to kneel before her in a semicircle when she is about to feed you her blood. Come now, I have some good news for you.
Fleur will obediently kneel to her on her right side.
Anton will come from the door and take the left side.
Odette will follow and be towards the center next to Fleur, and she is signing the cross.
Agravain is the last to approach, and he will kneel down at Anton's side.
She will stand there as a servant comes up behind and brings a robe to her and wraps her, and it's this long, beautiful, regal, dark purple robe with fur trimmings and everything, and just puts it around her shoulder. She drains the rest of her glass, then, as she did earlier with Anton, opens her arms by simply moving her fingers on it, and as she fills the goblet with her blood in front of you, she says, "You no doubt will remember Christmas Mass last Yule." And the moment she says that, you remember. You remember exactly where you were sitting in that church. Christmas Mass, the one time a year that Aveline takes all of you, goes down into the village, goes to the church. You remember exactly where you were sitting, what you were doing when you first saw him. Brother Umberto, who has been sent to the village to one day replace the old priest. You saw in that moment, when you saw Umberto, the very visage of God. His beauty was unparalleled. He had a gracefulness, a holiness, and at the same time a piety that radiated from him. And when he spoke, it was as if Metatron himself was possessing him. It was the voice of God. And you remember so keenly how transported you were, how beautiful and regal and full of hope and warmth and love that voice was as it rang out across this small church in the village, and how everybody else was entirely enraptured by Brother Umberto. It wasn't just his physical beauty, it was the very presence of the man. He was young and he was just perfect. And as Aveline will come to each of you with the goblet now filled with her blood and bring it to each of you in turn to drink from it, she will, unbeknownst to you perhaps, be reading your surface thoughts. And I would like you to tell us here, what surface thought does Aveline get from each of you as she lets that memory of Brother Umberto sink in? And the first to kneel to her was Fleur, so she is the first that Aveline will go to. Can you tell us, Fleur, what is the surface thought, the reflex thought that Fleur has about Brother Umberto?
There's this vision that pops into Fleur's mind. Umberto standing in darkness, a blinding halo of light behind him, obscuring his face from her view, the one she had so desperately tried to capture on canvas. And he holds his hand out to her, and she moves towards him, reaching out for him, yet they don't connect.
She will then move to Anton, the second to come and kneel to her and offer you the cup. What does she sense from Anton as she does this?
Intense anger and hatred. Someone needs to teach him a lesson. Someone needs to show him what it's really like.
She then moves over to Odette. And as she comes to you, Odette, before she gives you the cup, she gives you a very sweet smile, a very soft, warm smile, and she tucks a strand of hair a little bit underneath your veil, and she caresses your cheek, and she goes, "My sweet child." And she offers you the cup. What does she see?
She sees Odette in an unholy communion with the Father. She sees her trying to lure him in her own personal thoughts to regain the voice of God once more in a way that is both sacrificial and wanton.
And eventually she moves to Agravain. And as she brings the cup, she gives it to you and she says, "Show us that beautiful face, will you, my gallant knight?" She gives you the cup.
In absolute denial of her request, he presses the cup to his lips through the fabric and suckles the blood through the black fabric that covers his mouth. And as he does this, and she touches his mind, the first thing that comes to her isn't a vision, but a feeling. There's heat, the kind of wet heat like a southern summer. And then there's a flash of supple flesh, and it glistens in a dim candle lighting. And then it's swallowed by an inky void. There's another flash, and there's lips being made to press against knotted knuckles. Sallow skin riddled and oozing pustules, thrusting, heaving in the darkness. And then she can taste iron mingled with salt. And there's sound of a muffled scream and a choke, and then silence. And he hands the cup back to her.
She smiles and says, "My beautiful boy, I have decided that in the light of these talks of unrest amongst the peasants of the town, that it is perhaps time to have a voice of our own, speaking to them, a voice that they will listen to and want to obey. I have decided that one of you will embrace Brother Umberto. Of course, you can't turn him right away. We will first need to have you turn him into a ghoul, feed him your blood. He will need to be able to attend to his duties for several years still. But in time, once he has quelled this fervor for revolution that these peasants harbor in their breasts, he will be replaced and will be able to be turned completely. One of you will do this. Tomorrow, I have invited Brother Umberto and Padre Christoph to come here to dinner to discuss these matters of unrest in the town, to see what we can do to help our poor beleaguered peasants, farmers, bakers. When Umberto leaves, one of you will have fed him blood. Father Christophe, of course, will have to die. His body cannot be found. Anton and Agravain, your duty between now and tomorrow will be to find a suitable way to get rid of the body in a way that it can never be found. That would perhaps be a tad too much for the peasants to accept. Fleur, Odette, I trust you can find the time with the rest of this night to make the chapel somewhat acceptable, as I assume the Father will want to see it and want to make sure that we're good Christians here, that we keep the place holy. You have until dinner time tomorrow to plead your case and convince me that you should be the one to embrace Father Umberto. Some of you have already talked to me, and, well, I think I probably have a good idea already who I will give this boon to, who I will give this gift to, but it's still not too late to plead your case. Tell me why I should choose you, why you should be the one to turn Father Umberto into one of ours. Well, I trust you'll want to think on this, and you all have tasks to attend to. I myself have things to do. I'll bid you good night now, and I will hope that you will appreciate this gift that I'm giving you, and that you will take the time to think well upon why you should be the one to receive this generous gift. And with that, she turns, walks out of the room, leaving behind the scent of blood and decay hovering in the room.
Fleur will turn to Odette, smile on her face. Did you hear? We get to decorate the chapel.
Odette is obviously most pleased over this, and this shows across her face, and she smiles, and in a moment you realize that this was simply just a young woman, a young girl, really, who was embraced. But she, in much of her pleasure, looks back to Agravain, almost to remind him of what she had said about knowing him, about wanting his help in seeing Santiago.
Anybody else want to give us a final moment here before we close for the night?
Agravain stands and moves away from the scene. He's excited about this prospect, though perhaps feels a little too proud to plead a case. And as he's lost in his thought of this, he notices Odette's eyes glance to him again. And in his own mind, he's questioning how she can remember him. When the last they met, he looked very, very different from what he's become.
From the moment Aveline had said the name Umberto, you watch, if you were to look at Anton, you would see a plan formulating. This needs to be him. Almost like there's nothing going on in his head, but for anyone who's spent any time near him, you know he's plotting 1,000 different ways to make this happen. And for a moment, you almost catch a glimmer in his eyes as he sees the ability to possibly incite a little chaos and something that actually makes his entire body stop slumping as much as you normally see him. And he just kind of sits there in thought. It has to be him.
Slurhev.
Fleur, if Odette allows it, will sort of grab Odette's hand and start to lead her out of the drawing room. She's rambling about drapery and, paintings that can be hung in the chapel, ways to brighten up the place. But as she is excitedly, probably more vibrant than anyone has seen her before, rambling about interior design, she's thinking of Umberto and his face and his voice and how this needs to be preserved forever. A beauty of such magnitude should not be squandered with mortality.
Odette allows her to hold her hand.
And she maybe begins to see a bit of Aveline in herself as she thinks of Umberto. And the cycle that will continue again and again.
And as you think this thought, the screaming of your brother, Geoffroy, begins anew somewhere deep in the manor in one of the hidden rooms where Aveline keeps him. Only this time, the screams that you hear contain no ecstasy, no joy, no pleasure, only horror and pain.